what they've done by stealing 20,000, at least children, Ukrainian children, and disappearing them into Russia to serve with Russian families, to live with Russian families, and to be raised as Russian against the will of their parents. Does that justify?
Can you even state?
Does that justify U.S.?
Hold on. When you say against the will of their parents, what do you mean?
I mean that the parents, they are not allowed to see the kids.
Is that what's happening?
That is.
Do you even know what the Russian argument is on that?
I don't care why they're
orphans.
doing it. It's wrong.
They're orphans, and if the parents are identified, they ship them back to Ukraine. They're orphans. They're orphans. It is absolutely true. They're orphans in combat zones.
That is not true.
They are orphans in combat zones. That is 100% true. Now, you could say, well, Russia has an obligation to send the orphans to Ukraine. That could be a discussion. But again, hold on. The framing here.
Do you not think children should be reunited with their families if we're able?
Wick. They're orphans. They don't have families. They don't have families.
But
it's
in
a combat zone.
In many cases.
And if
their parents are saying, "Give us back our kids,"
and every month when they identify parents, they do send them back.
They are making it very, very hard to identify
you're all over
parents.
the place. First,
I'm not all over the place. You are all over the place.
First
Again, let me ask you one more time.
Let me ask you one more time.
You keep not answering the question. Does the Bucha massacre justify, because you have agreed that violations of human rights allow a foreign country to go in militarily, right? So if Bucha's not enough for you, is them snatching these 20,000 orphans, as you call them, off the streets and disappearing them into Russia, is that not enough for you? What about all the other war crimes that have been recognized by the UN, by the ICJ, by the OSCE, right? By these other human rights watchdog groups that they know is happening in Russian-occupied Ukrainian territories, where they are forcing Ukrainian citizens to become Russian, get a Russian passport, and then they conscript the men and send them off to fight against Ukraine. Does that not justify?
Whoa. Hold on. We got a problem with conscription now? Okay, we got a couple questions here.
Yes, if you are making someone...
Wick, please. A couple points here. First of all, you didn't know what was going on with the orphans. You were saying, the children are being...
This is absolutely happening.
Wick, for God's sake. You made the claim, all these children and their parents are begging for them back.
In a lot of cases, yes.
And this is happening in the majority or the vast majority of cases. That's what was implied. The reality is they're orphans in a combat zone, and they're being moved out of the combat zone. There's a genuine discussion to be had as to whether or not the orphans should be sent to Ukraine or whether or not they should be sent.
Pure Russian propaganda. It's just not true. It's just not true.
I let you finish, didn't I? Whether they should be sent to safer places, I did. Whether they should be sent to safer places deeper within Russia, away from the combat zone. I understand that Russia has annexed those areas, and there are people there now who the Russian government considers to be Russian citizens. And I also understand there's conscription occurring. The Ukrainian government is also conscripting people who don't want to fight. There's plenty of videos you can find right now of vans pulling up, grabbing people off the street, forcing them into the front line.
First of all,
the big reason why this is happening is, a big reason this is happening is because Ukraine is suffering from a critical manpower shortage, which is one of the reasons why they are losing.
Okay,
now
you
laid out like 8 points. You want to talk about the Bucha massacre?
You keep talking about things, and we keep needing to address them because you bring up points that are just demonstrably wrong.
And I wait for you to finish.
No, you do not, sir. So the Army General Christopher G. Cavoli met April 3rd, right? He's the commander of EUCOM. He's the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO forces, right? He sat down in front of a session of Congress, right? An open session of Congress. And he talked about the Ukraine situation. This is very recent. In this, he testified, right? And I think he would be in a better position to know than you or I, considering the access to the intel he has,
He'd
right?
also be biased.
Right? Biased.
He's involved in NATO, isn't he?
Okay. Yes, but he has the duty to tell the truth. Like, here we go. Like saying he's biased because he's a NATO general, right? He's testified that Ukraine has solved its manpower issues, and it is currently in a better position today than it was last year.
So I suppose my issue with this conversation so far is I still don't understand why I should care about Ukraine. You guys are arguing humanitarian issues. You want to talk about China and humanitarian issues? We can do that. I'm unmoved by the plight of a country that has nothing to do with us.
I think you're just incorrect when you say it has nothing to do with us. Again, our allies, Taiwan, for example.
So we should invade China.
Why?
Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, these countries rely on us as well.
I think if
China's
China-
been invading the South China Sea and sinking Vietnamese fishing vessels, they're building military bases. Should we invade mainland China?
If they invade Taiwan, yes.
Well,
we have a bright red line.
They took over Hong Kong.
We have a bright red. Oh, they took over
There were
Hong
mass
Kong
protests
because
trying to
of
shut it down.
Sure, but the
Hong Kong was a
British government had made a contract to give it back in so many years. That was a legal thing.
Is that the
You could say
authority of
that
a
was
foreign
wrong.
government to tell Hong Kong that they give up their rights?
The Hong Kong citizens, if you
The
want.
HongOng citizens aren't beholden to the will of the Crown of England. So when the protesters in Hong Kong started saying, we do not want the rule of mainland China, and China sent in tanks to crush them.
Yeah, that was wrong. That was horrible.
So like with Crimea, should the U.S. now get involved and support the people of Hong Kong and Southeast Asia in incursions against mainland China?
If we could send aid into Hong Kong, do you think we should? If we could send monetary aid to help smuggle people out, do you think we should do
Should
that?
the U.S. send...
Well, can you answer my question?
I'll ask you a question first.
Sure.
Right. Should we sink the flagship of the Chinese fleet in the South China Sea?
If they invade Taiwan, yes. If they
They
cross
invaded
that
Hong
line.
Kong.
Again,
The people of Hong Kong did not vote for that.
characterizing as an invasion is a little bit different. It's a different context. And
They sent in
situation that
tanks.
happened. Again,
The people
horrible.
fought back against it,
Horrible.
and they started disappearing them.
Horrible.
So what's the difference between Crimea and Hong Kong?
So in Crimea, there was no contract, right? So in Hong Kong,
I thought you
the
said,
British
you said there-
government
You said there was a lease that Russia had.
with Sevastopol, which is the
Sevastopol.
military. Sorry, pronunciations might.
So the tanks that Russia had in Crimea were already leased to have been in there at the Black Sea port.
but not
so
to
Russia-
blockade the Ukrainian military bases there, not to lock down parliament there. Again, the British, as I understand it, and again, I'm not an expert on China by any means, but the British had a agreement with the government of China that in 100 years that we're going to give back Hong Kong into China's hands. And the day came and they did that. Now I'm with you. China has done horrible things to the protesters in Hong Kong, horrible things indeed. And there might
And
be
the
an
Uyghur
argument.
Muslims.
Yes,
Our
absolutely.
interests, I think, are
they're-
very much at risk with China right now, considering the seizures, the atolls they've built, and their declaration of
Let
ownership
me
of the
ask you
South
this.
China Sea.
Would you think it's beneficial then for us to stymie China's allies to hurt China's allies? Do you think making China's allies weaker would be in our best interest in the United States?
No.
No, why not? We're about to
Because
have
the
a
reason
conflict with China.
the reason I asked the question is that
I understand that's the reason you ask your question. but
the
this
reason we
brought
asked the
up
question
another
is that we have multiple conflicts around the world, and my point was, when you guys are debating the humanitarian issues of Ukraine, I'm sitting here being like, I literally don't care. No, like you're arguing with him. He's saying, you're saying we should be involved, and you're saying, but there's humanitarian issues. I know you're arguing other things too, but in that context, I'm just like, I literally don't care.
Let me explain my position a little bit more. So I think perhaps there's some agreement that me and Wick have on the extremes, which is that if you have a sufficient humanitarian crisis or a sufficient erosion of democratic principles or constitutional principles, that could justify intervention in certain circumstances. I think we all believe that, right? Like,
No.
Okay, intervention in Nazi Germany, we all agree.
I mean,
Stop them from doing what they were doing.
the issue with Nazi Germany goes beyond humanitarian issues. The U.S. did not
So
invade.
does Ukraine and so does
The
China.
U.S. did not invade, storm the beaches of Normandy because of the Holocaust.
But if we knew about the Holocaust, and even if Germany wasn't doing all the other things that we invaded them for, I think that would have been sufficient reason to invade Germany.
So
right?
we should invade China now?
No,
I mean, they're giving forced abortions to Uyghur women.
I'm not. Let me explain. I'm not saying that we should invade China now. I understand there's a lot of it's a different situation, and we can go into the minutia of the different factors that are involved. But what I'm saying is that if you do reach a certain threshold, I think, and it's possible to intervene, I think that there is a justification to do so. The question here is, does Ukraine deserve U.S. intervention? Is it worth $200 billion? What are we getting out of this? What's Ukraine getting out of this, right? And
Ukraine's getting the right to exist.
From what I see is that really what's happening is, you said something a while ago that I thought was actually kind of profound. Your belief on the Israel-Palestine conflict is that, Palestine needs to be allowed to lose. I sort of believe that about this as well. I think that by giving Ukraine weapons at this point, all we're doing is we might be slowing the progress of the Russian military to some extent, but it's dramatically increasing the casualties, and the end result's going to be the same.
You may believe that, but that is demonstrably untrue by the facts of the matter. But I want to talk and
it's not even a country.
You keep saying
it's an
things
authoritarian.
that are just not true.
No, it is.
You keep saying things.
You
that
can
are
look
just
this
not
up.
true,
You can look this up.
The people who have
Should we invade
access.
Gaza?
Do I think we should invade Gaza?
Should we invade Gaza?
No, absolutely not.
Well, why not? There's a humanitarian crisis.
Again, there are levels of intervention, and this is why I asked you the question earlier about Hong Kong, well, in this case, would you be okay, not with military intervention, but with us intervening with aid money? Do you think that...
For Hong Kong?
For Hong Kong, yes.
I don't think we should be involved in it at all.
At all?
Yeah, at all.
Right? Well, this is where I disagree. I think that let me ask, are you an isolationist? I don't actually know.
What does that mean?
An isolationist is someone who doesn't want foreign involvements at all. So, for example, okay. So let me ask your line then. At what point would it be sufficient? What do you care about? What would you care about in a foreign land that says, okay, the U.S. needs to get involved in this?
What does it mean by involved?
Whatever you think it means.
So like a trade negotiation?
Perhaps
we're buying rare earths from China, so we negotiate a trade agreement. Involvement in that is fine.
So when I'm talking about conflict. So if there's a conflict in China, for example, with the Uyghur Muslims, would that be something you should care about? That, hey, we need to stop this from happening?
Yeah, that's a coin toss. I don't know that the U.S. involved in a conflict which could escalate to kinetic conflict, for which it's not a priority of the United States. There's an argument of, wow, it is really bad what they're doing. So maybe we just don't do business there. Maybe it's that simple. Maybe
that's a form of intervention.
Not really.
It actually is, though.
Saying I'm not going to buy bread from you is not me kicking your door in at your grocery store.
You're saying, I'm not going to buy bread for you unless you change this.
It's called a boycott.
I understand, but
there's
it is
nothing
a form
wrong with
of intervention. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying it's a form of intervention.
That's an extremely absurd definition of intervention. Which
I don't agree.
Okay, well then let's define this between kinetic intervention and purchasing boycotts.
There's a whole host of other types of intervention that we can do when we talk about this.
So when we're talking about, should the U.S. engage in forms of warfare, such as sanctions or kinetic conflict, psychological operations, cyber warfare, et cetera, the answer is no. Should we stop buying from them? Yep. Yeah, if there's a guy who he's got animals and he's a butcher and he tortures the animals before he kills them, I ain't buying from him. I'm not intervening. I'm just saying I'm not going to go. That guy's crazy.
Do you think there's any foreign situation where you would be in favor of the U.S. using a kinetic intervention?
Probably. Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. So subscribe and come hang out.